Hello again. Now, the DA has chosen its leadership, with John Steenhuisen winning that leadership by landslide over Dr. Mpho Phalatse. But the party has its work cut out for it if it's to make a significant electoral dent spoken about during its weekend's Congress. Well, how will this happen, especially given that the DA is very clear that it doesn't want to enter coalition agreements without being at the center of them? How will this fly with other parties? Well, to discuss this and other issues further, I'm joined now by elections analyst Wayne Sussman, who's in studio with me here this afternoon. I've got leadership expert Dr. Mazwe Majola on Zoom, and also political analyst Sanet Madonsela on Zoom. Good afternoon, gentlemen and lady. Thank you very much for your time. You've all have heard John Steenhuisen yesterday outlining the DA's vision for 2024 in terms of what he thinks the DA should stand for and how he should achieve a better performance. Are you convinced what he's outlined will deliver the goods? Let me start with you, Sanet.
Thanks so much for having me. I don't think that the DA would necessarily be responsible for a reduced majority for the African National Congress. I do think that the ANC is going to dip below 50 with or without the DA. So I think that they're just capitalizing on that and saying that they will. I think that the rest of their key points are quite interesting. I think it's a good move in terms of focusing on our energy crisis. I think it's a great move in terms of focusing on economic development in the country and so on. So those are all good points. But the question is, how are you going to go into a coalition if you've already decided or predetermined that you would like to take the lead? So I think that's going to be the challenge.
Wayne, your answer to that?
Well, let's go back to the DA's high point, and that was the 2016 local government election. And I'm obviously careful that I'm not comparing apples with apples because that wasn't a national and provincial election. But in that 2016 local government elections, the DA got the overwhelming number of white voters to vote for it. It got a large swath of the Indian population. It had a breakthrough with middle-class black voters in urban areas such as Gauteng, and it won the majority of the coloured votes, particularly in Cape Town and, for instance, the Cape Winelands District, places like Paarl. If one had to look at the party today and look at recent by-election trends and the 2019 results and the 2021 local government results, the party isn't near there. So you're seeing opinion polls suggest that the DA is on the up, but I just don't know how they get close to that 27% mark, that 25% mark, without again appealing to black middle-class voters in urban areas, the large majority of Indian voters, coloured voters, and the majority of white voters.
Dr. Majola?
Yes, I'm concerned about John Steenhuisen's fixation and obsession about toppling the ANC. I think it seems to me that really that's what he's dreaming about, instead of telling us as South Africans how is he going to grow the economy, how is he going to deal with corruption, with unemployment, with crime, with inequality. And secondly, I think that DA must start to fight its own battle. They must not hide behind the coalitions. Because it seems to me that if DA wants to topple the ANC, then they must go to the elections in 2024 as DA, not this thing that Steenhuisen is saying that they will form a coalition that will go to the elections fighting the ANC. The coalitions must be something that will appear post-elections, when they will collaborate and say, what numbers did you get? How can we work together? But to speak about or to dream about the coalitions even before the elections, it means that the DA has already exceeded defeat from the ANC. So I think Steenhuisen, as a leader, he must put his mettle on and tell us that how is he going to lead if he wins the election next year.
Yeah, he spent quite some time in his victory speech, let's call it that, yesterday, talking about this coalition setup that we're referring, Dr. Majola, but particularly what he has defined as the ANC-EFF doomsday coalition that he thinks the DA must prevent, like reduce the ANC's share of the vote and stop the EFF from any access to any power, corridors of power, if there's an ANC-EFF coalition. Is that the right strategy, you think, Sanet?
I don't agree with his strategy. I think that he is focused, like Mr. Majola said, I think he's focused a lot on losing already, and he's already decided that they can't win the majority of votes. I do think that they are quite concerned about an ANC-EFF coalition, as he said, because there might be things such as your expropriation without compensation on the table. So I think that's what they are fearful of. But he also mentioned that he's quite skeptical about forming a coalition with the Patriotic Alliance, which means that you've already cut out a number of people that you can work with. And he kept mentioning over the weekend that he'd like to work with like-minded parties. So what is a like-minded party? So I think he should also just elaborate a bit more on that. But I don't think that they are going to be in for, I don't think that they're going to do very well if they've already predetermined everything. I don't think that ANC-EFF coalition would necessarily result in a doomsday, but I do think that there are a lot of people, especially in the private sector, who might be concerned about it. But I also think that there's a lot of overlap between the ANC and the EFF, and I think that would obviously then result in them joining forces. And I think if they did do it, I think that they would have a very strong coalition given their overlying values.
Yeah, and what I found fascinating, Wayne, is how he said he is going to contact these leaders of these other opposition parties. He called them like-minded ones and say to them, it's time for a reset. But it looks like he wants the DA to be in charge of the reset. Well, it sounds like that.
The DA are by far the they're the official opposition. They're the second largest party. They're going to have their work cut out in 2024. I think the party is more vulnerable today than it was 5 years ago. But correct. So there are already examples of this in KwaZulu-Natal, where they're working well with the Inkatha Freedom Party, where they have a non-aggression pact, where they stand aside in by-elections. And that has paid dividends because they have been able to together beat the ANC in by-elections. And I think the DA have learned some lessons from what happened in Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. If you heard Mayor Brink when he was elected the other night, he spoke a lot about the opposition part, about the coalition partners, and not necessarily just about the big blue DA machine. So I think lessons have been learnt. They realize that voters understand that there's a strong chance of coalitions, certainly in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal in 2024. And the DA needs to be seen as able and willing partners in those coalitions.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of experience currently. Well, the ANC has got the EFF in a number of metros where there's been musical chairs around who's the mayor, who's not the mayor. Dr. Majola, from a leadership perspective, do you think the DA is well positioned to lead this new, what did you call it, moonshot pact of a coalition of opposition parties come 2024?
I don't think so, because each and every party would like to maintain its identity. I mean, I want to believe that IFP would like to go to the 2024 election as an IFP. I would like to believe that Action SA will do the same, and Freedom Front will do the same. As I've alluded earlier, that anyone who would speak about coalitions, it will be really after the elections. But DA strategy says, let's close rank, let's work together, let's go to the elections as a unit and as a force. So to me, that they are not going to win that, that's a very bad strategy. And actually, it shows John Steenhuisen's cowardness, that he's a coward. He's a leader that already, as I'm saying, that he doesn't want to go there alone and showcase his vision and his capabilities, so that South African can say, we are going to vote for you based on these ones. But now already when someone is speaking about coalitions, even before the elections, and it means that he's not the leader that is really strong enough and courageous enough to face the ANC and other parties.
Yeah, he seems to think, and he said so in his speech yesterday, Sanet, that the DA can become the leader of what he called the alternative government, already planning to say we can become the leader. Those were his words of the alternative government. Do South Africans have viable alternatives in respect of reducing the ANC's below 50% of the national vote?
I think that there's been a trend in terms of a move away from majority politics where you have one party wins all and so on. So I think that the DA is taking a cautionary approach where they try to build a coalition for the 2024 elections. But I think for the 2029 elections, for example, I think that they may be much stronger if they actually do get an opportunity to lead during these coalitions. And I think that's the alternative that they might be going for. So it's more of a slow and steady wins the race as opposed to the winner takes it all. So I think that they are aware that I don't think that the ANC is going to have more than 50%. I don't think any of the other parties might have a possibility of getting more than 50%. So I think they're trying to get ahead of that, embracing the fact that there's been a move towards coalition politics and actually trying to take the lead in terms of those coalitions, position themselves, govern those respective municipalities, those respective cities, those respective metros, and then say in 2029, hey, this is what we've done, and then actually win the people's vote. So I think that might be their approach.
Yeah, it sounds like a very ambitious goal that was espoused yesterday, Wayne, by John Steenhuisen.
Very ambitious goal, but I want to make one comment, and that's first internally. Mpho Phalatse was smashed in the race. I think she got 16% of the vote. John Steenhuisen got 84%.
Have they released the numbers? I haven't seen
those are the numbers I've heard, that John Steenhuisen won with over 80% of the vote.
Okay.
I know that a lot of people in the DA enjoy watching television shows like The West Wing. When you're in a position of power and you vanquish your opponent, it would cost nothing to pay tribute to them for the race they ran, to thank them for the competition of ideas. And I didn't see Steenhuisen, maybe I missed it, thanking Phalatse for the challenge and asking him to join her to commit to every single day between now and the elections to help him grow the party in the city of Johannesburg, Gauteng, and nationally. I didn't see that coming. I don't think it would have cost much. And yes, we can speak about coalitions, but it's also maximizing the coalition within your own party. That he walks out of there, look, their party was a success, the Congress was a success. Started on time, it ended on time. Things ran smoothly, it seemed orderly, there was a nice spirit, people are energized. But he could have done more to reach out to Mpho Phalatse, who I think made a very impassioned speech on Saturday when she made her case for leader, and I think that was lacking from Steenhuisen. It's one thing speaking to other coalition partners, it's another thing working with every faction within your own party as well.
Yeah, do you agree, Dr. Majola, that he missed some opportunity there as a leader? Because I saw reports afterwards that Dr. Mpho Phalatse has actually said she won't leave the DA. She said she will work to support John Steenhuisen, but he didn't have the magnanimity at the end of his speech to thank her.
No, I completely agree with Wayne. I don't know if I missed it, but also I didn't see Mpho Phalatse going to the stage congratulating John Steenhuisen. So you can see that there is this internal dynamics really even inside the party. But it would have been even more better if John, as the one who won, extended that olive branch to Mpho Phalatse. So he didn't do that. It definitely missed an opportunity there just to bring and to preach and to consolidate unity and cohesion, even for amongst members of DA, so that they can see that moving forward, they are united and then there is no division inside the party.
Yeah, and I was just ahead of the Federal Congress of the DA, was just talking to a number of people. People were saying if the DA hopes to improve its electoral performance compared to the 2019 general election, I don't remember the numbers, Wayne, you might remind us, but if they want to improve on that next year, they're also going to have to make sure that the leadership at the top is seen and is very inclusive, because then you want to appeal to different segments of the South African population. Do you think they can pull it off like that? Do you think they're going to come across? Do you think John Steenhuisen is that figurehead of inclusivity in the DA? Sanet?
I do think that there's a possibility, but I also think that the party's been suffering a major blow in terms of what's been happening with the exodus of African leaders from the party. So I think if he would like to achieve that, I think that he should probably have more African leaders integrated within his leadership. And I also think that they can't afford more people just leaving the party, because I don't think that it reflects quite positively on it.
Yeah. Wayne?
Yeah, so it was 21.86%, so 22% is what the DA got in
2019.
In the 2019
So if you're hoping for 25 or above, you have to do a little bit more.
Correct. You have to connect again like you did in 2016, as I said at the start, with black urban middle-class voters. They have to connect again with large swaths of voters. So Gayton McKenzie's arrived on the scenes. He's competing with the DA head-on with coloured voters. You've seen the Freedom Front eat into the Afrikaans support. You've seen Herman Mashaba arrive and make a big dent in places like Soweto. So the DA will have its work cut out. But again, I do think the party's more united today than they were at the end of their last conference, where, if you remember, Herman Mashaba left quickly afterwards and Action SA and other iterations were formed.
Okay, its vision is to defeat the ANC, he says, let's keep them below 50% and keep the EFF out of power. He doesn't want that so-called doomsday coalition to happen. But he outlined a number of points. You referred to one of them, Sanet, a little bit earlier, around the energy crisis. He said the DA will end load shedding. That's a promise. And Dr. Majola, he said the DA will bring unemployment rate to below 20%. He will have violent crime, defeat cadre deployment, and devolve more powers over a number of areas to local authorities. Does sound like this is a vision that he calls first prize. Is that a first prize vision, Sanet?
I think that it's a very ambitious vision. I think it's something that the South African population would stand behind. I think especially if you are a small business owner, or if you are, for example, an institution that functions online or remotely, and so on, if you're a butchery owner, etc. So I think that it's quite ambitious. I think that it is a lovely approach. I think that it would be welcomed. Whether it's completely achievable remains to be seen. But I also think that in order for them to actually achieve this, you'd actually have to delve into what the former Eskom CEO mentioned. Because if that is true, then it doesn't matter who takes over power, because those factors would still be there. So then you would have to find out whether it is true, then put contingency measures in place in order to address the challenges that Eskom is facing. So I think that they would have quite a steep journey ahead of them. But I do think that South Africans would welcome the changes that he proposed.
Yeah, and there's likely to be more fragmentation on that ballot paper. There's newer parties that might emerge. I mean, we still don't even know yet. The date has not been proclaimed for the elections, but already you have the likes of former DA, former Action SA, Bongani Baloyi, just last week, forming a new party called Shiluva for Young People. So there might be more fragmentation, and it will be very interesting to see who's going to side with who. Dr. Majola, if John Steenhuisen called you and say, from a leadership perspective, ahead of 2024, what should he focus on to give the DA that bit of a chance in coming out of the elections, being a bigger opposition? What would you tell him to focus on?
Well, internally, be a unifier. Make sure that you unify everyone, and all the members must feel comfortable, must feel at home. There shouldn't be anyone who must be ostracized. and be a transformational leader, go out there, make things happen, and preach, tell South Africans about bread and butter issues, about unemployment, about what you've said about ESCOM issue or about energy crisis. People want to hear that, you know. They don't want to hear about this obsession about ANC. Yes, ANC, some people might be dissatisfied about ANC, but people, they just want to know, what will this leader do for us? What will this organization do for us if we can vote? Or what will be a difference? What will be an impact that will have? Why not ANC? And then why? Obviously, you spoke about the alternative before.
Yes.
So I think that's what you must focus on and really stop. As I'm saying, that for me, I don't think it's wise. This thing of really talking about toppling ANC all the time. He must just talk about what ANC is not doing correct and then focus on that and tell people how is he going to change things and make them better.
Okay, Wayne, I'll end off with Sanet. Your parting remarks. I mean, the DAs, the opportunities there.
So I agreed with the previous respondents that the DA has to come across as a party which can have the solutions to the length and breadth of this country, to voters in townships, to voters in formal settlements, to their traditional support base. If they want to grow, they have to reach out to new communities and speak a language to voters which resonates well with them. Otherwise, they'll remain in their current predicament, which is a party which appeals mainly to small groups of which appeals to less people than they did 5 years ago, less people than they did 7 years ago.
Yeah, Sanet, your final word on this?
My final word on this is that the DA is very good at governing. The metros that have been under their control have done extremely well. They as running water. I mean, if you're in Cape Town, you hardly see a pothole and so on. So instead of focusing on what your opponent is doing, focus on what you're doing right. As it was previously said, find a way to appeal to the voters and so on. But I would also say that if South Africa is going to venture into coalition politics, something that I would strongly urge is go out there, make sure that you have formal coalition agreements, because then you can't just dissolve an agreement. Make sure that you have coalition committees, that you have coalition councils, so that people can feel included, so that you have into the fight for positions and so on. Because I think we are, as a country, at a point where people just want their basic services rendered. And I think that the reduction in votes over the years have pointed towards the fact that South Africans don't trust politicians, because we say all the right things in the run-up to the elections and do actually nothing when it's time to do something. So I would say, show people what you have done, show people what you can do, and say to them, if you do vote for me, this is what I'm going to do. But I would say, formalize those agreements so that you have everything in place, so that you don't have to dissolve and have constant motions of no confidence.
Sanet Madonsela, Dr. Mazwe Majola, and Wayne Sussman, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your insights and your time this afternoon here on Today, as we were unpacking the DA's vision as expressed yesterday in his victory speech at the end of its largest ever federal Congress, espoused by John Steenhuisen, who's been re-elected as the DA leader.